We are West Africa's premium bank for investment and development. With over 40 years' experience, we are the only development finance institution that covers all 15 member states of ECOWAS, continuously driving developmental projects in the West African sub-region. For decades, we have tackled socio-economic challenges through our financing of programs that cover diverse initiatives for the sustainable development of member states. We provide financing for regional and national projects across priority sectors such as infrastructure, agriculture and climate resilience, industry and agro-processing, healthcare and education, transport and logistics, water, ICT and energy. We are a key driver of transformation, effecting positive change in the present for a future resilient, enabled and resourceful sub-region. We operate in Benin, Burkina Faso, Cabo Verde, Côte d'Ivoire, the Gambia, Ghana, Guinea, Guinea-Bissau, Liberia, Mali, Niger, Nigeria, Senegal, Sierra Leone, and Togo. We have deep roots in innovating technology and growth. We initiated the African Biofuels and Renewable Energy Fund, ABREF. Now ABREC are founding shareholders of Askai Airlines and a founding shareholder in EcoBank Transnational Incorporated, ETI. We have and continue to enable key projects through our public and private windows with successful projects such as creation of the cement factory in Kagbelen by Diamond Cement Company, Guinea. Enhancement of the portable water supply system in Tafire town and the surrounding communities of Badikaha and Ngolodugu, Côte d'Ivoire. Rehabilitation and equipment of health facilities, Togo. Electrification by solar photovoltaic systems of 700 community infrastructure, Benin. Construction of 27 new drinking water supply systems in the impact area of the Samendeni Valley Integrated Development Program, Burkina Faso. Construction of the University of Science and Technology in the town of Koidu, Kono District, Sierra Leone. Installation and operation of an intravenous fluids factory at Aveta by Do Pharma, Togo. Construction of a 120 megawatt thermal station at Maria Gleta, Benin. Construction of the Samendeni Dam and Hydroelectric Power Station, Burkina Faso, to mention a few. We are poised to fulfill our developmental mandate under the leadership of the President, Dr. George Ejekum Nanadongo. We are EBID. EBID, transforming ECOWAS communities. We have more information for you at www.bidc-ebid.org.
Count.
Across West Africa, the ECOWAS Bank for Investment and Development, EBID, is the cornerstone institution dedicated to socio-economic progress across communities. Through strategic financing and investments across ECOWAS member states, EBID has engendered impactful change in diverse sectors such as energy, agriculture, and infrastructural development. Projects financed by EBID have alleviated poverty, created jobs, and influenced the scope of business development across local communities. EBID shapes the economic landscape of ECOWAS member states. Our operational activities are intended to lay the foundation for the sustainable development of member states of the community through financing of regional and national projects in the areas of infrastructure, rural development, social sector, industry, and services. Our philosophy on investment is an effective blend of financial and developmental objectives that ensure that all projects are beneficial for both the region and investors. Our business model enables a diversified portfolio of investment for both private and public sector clients with a clearly defined strategy that aims to transform livelihoods. EBID collaborates with governments and key partners in both the private and public sectors to ensure sustainable progress and development. These partnerships have powered many projects that have harnessed technology and innovated financial models to drive sustainable progress and development. We see ourselves as a catalyst for lasting change. As such, we consistently measure the positive impact our investments and projects have on the environment to spur on future projects. EBID's local knowledge, proven experience, and broader mandate are key drivers for its competitiveness, as well as access to attractive projects in the West African region. With EBID, ECOWAS member states will experience an economically strong, industrialized, prosperous, and globalized West Africa. Together, we can be united for progress. We are EBID. EBID, transforming ECOWAS communities. We have more information for you at www.bidc-ebid.org. We are West Africa's premium bank for investment and development. With over 40 years' experience, we are the only development finance institution that covers all 15 member states of ECOWAS, continuously driving developmental projects in the West African sub-region. For decades, we have tackled socio-economic challenges through our financing of programs that cover diverse initiatives for the sustainable development of member states. We provide financing for regional and national projects across priority sectors such as infrastructure, agriculture and climate resilience, industry and agro-processing, healthcare and education, transport and logistics, water, ICT and energy. We are a key driver of transformation, effecting positive change in the present for a future resilient, enabled and resourceful sub-region. We operate in Benin, Burkina Faso, Cabo Verde, Côte d'Ivoire, the Gambia, Ghana, Guinea, Guinea-Bissau, Liberia, Mali, Niger, Nigeria, Senegal, Sierra Leone, and Togo. We have deep roots in innovating technology and growth. We initiated the African Biofuels and Renewable Energy Fund, ABREF. Now ABREC are founding shareholders of Askai Airlines and a founding shareholder in EcoBank Transnational Incorporated, ETI. We have and continue to enable key projects through our public and private windows with successful projects such as creation of the cement factory in Kagblelen by Diamond Cement Company, Guinea. Enhancement of the portable water supply system in Tafire town and the surrounding communities of Badikaha and Ngolodugu, Côte d'Ivoire. Rehabilitation and equipment of health facilities, Togo. Electrification by solar photovoltaic systems of 700 community infrastructure, Benin. Construction of 27 new drinking water supply systems in the impact area of the Samendeni Valley Integrated Development Program, Burkina Faso. Construction of the University of Science and Technology in the town of Koidu, Kono District, Sierra Leone. Installation and operation of an intravenous fluids factory at Aveta by Do Pharma, Togo. Construction of a 120 megawatt thermal station at Maria Gleta, Benin. Construction of the Samendeni Dam and Hydroelectric Power Station, Burkina Faso, to mention a few. We are poised to fulfill our developmental mandate under the leadership of the President, Dr. George Ejekum Nanadongo. We are EBID. EBID, transforming ECOWAS communities. We have more information for you at www.bidc-ebid.org.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you may find yourself. But most importantly, I do hope you find yourself on the continent of Africa, or at least I do hope you find your heart with the continent of Africa. Because today, I, along with these extraordinary individuals I have joining me in the studio, will highlight what we like to call road mapping infrastructure development in ECOWAS, as the second edition of the ECOWAS Bank for Investment and Development President Roundtable. Now, one of the things I want you all to imagine is a West Africa that has an outstanding road and railway system connecting communities, or a West Africa where anyone and everyone can access primary healthcare freely, or a West Africa where perhaps through the power of telecommunications, children can access education and become more globally competitive, if I want to put it that way. I could go on and on and on, but by now you know that our main focus is on the glass half full. When you talk about West Africa, we can talk about the challenges, and then we can just shut everything down and say there is no hope. But we like to look at the success stories. What is it that organizations are doing that perhaps you, wherever you may find yourself, can replicate? Bottom line is we want an ECOWAS of peoples where individuals are citizens who are happy with not just construction, but transformation. My name is Anita Erskine, and I bring you this extraordinary roundtable, President's Roundtable, the second edition, today, right here from Accra, hopefully beaming around the world through the power of Metro TV, DSTV 277. Well, tell your friends, if they can't access DSTV, by all means, we are across all social media platforms from YouTube to Facebook, so you have no excuse than to be part of this extremely important conversation. Now allow me to bring in the other voices to this conversation. I would like to welcome, or for now, if this were a live event, we'll be giving them a round of applause. So I'll give them a little bit of energy by giving them my own round of applause. I'm going to start off with you, Mr. Rajesh Nair, Regional Head, Group Business Development, Shaporji, Palonji and Company Private Limited. You're very welcome. I give you a round of applause, sir. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you, Anita. Thank you for the wonderful welcome.
Thank you.
And I really appreciate EBID and also appreciate the Metro TV for organizing this event and giving us a platform for us to have a voice on this topic. I represent a group called Shapurji Palanji. It's a 160-year-old engineering and contracting company. We are present in India, Middle East, and Africa. In Africa, in Ghana, we are present for the last 20 years. We have been working in a lot of transformational projects, be it hospitals, hotels, buildings, railways, roads in West Africa all alone. As of now, we are doing a business of almost $1 billion in West Africa alone.
I love to hear that, and that's why we're here. Like I said, the glass half full. I go over to Mr. Magnus Lincoln Kwashi, CEO, Delin Consult Limited. Magnus, you're very welcome.
Thank you very much, Anita, for having me. And I think I share the same sentiments with Raj. It's a beautiful morning, and I like the energy with which you begin this program. It's amazing.
Thank you.
I am CEO of Delin Consult. We have been around for the last over 20 years, and we have been involved in projects within the sub-region on the Abidjan-Lagos corridor. We're currently supervising the 17 kilometer between Tema and the Central University. And we have also participating in training staff from the 15 states on climate change resilience readiness. We are working on Bolgatanga to Polmakom, to the Togo border up north, which is 70% complete. And we have recently also signed a project with the World Bank on BRT in Kumasi. I live on this corridor. I live on the corridor, which is so important to Ghanaians, and I tell you, I'm really happy to participate in this discussion.
I'm so happy, and I'm intrigued by all your work, and that's what the conversation will come to, you telling us a lot more. And also, don't hide away from the challenges, because we want to know the real story, Magnus. We come to Dr. Robert Talierso, who's the Country Director, Ghana, Liberia, and Sierra Leone, World Bank Group. How are you doing, Robert?
Very well. Thanks so much for having us this morning, and especially thanks to ECOWAS and EBID for inviting us to this discussion. I think this is exactly the kind of discussion we need to be having, on two levels. One, bringing together the multilaterals, because none of these problems can be solved individually. And secondly, bringing together the public and the private sector, because we all need to work together to address the problems of development in the continent. The World Bank Group works across the entire continent, as you know, but I'm the country director for Ghana, Liberia, and Sierra Leone. So I'll focus my remarks on those three countries today and sprinkle in a couple other examples here and there. Across those three countries, we currently have a portfolio of about $5 billion equivalent across the three, working across many sectors and many areas, but including infrastructure, digital infrastructure, transportation, energy, water, agriculture, and so on. So I'm really pleased to be part of the discussion today.
That is it, which brings us to the Director of the Research and Strategic Planning Department of the ECOWAS Bank for Investment and Development for the purpose of this conversation, EBID, in the person of Mr. McDonald Say Guanu. And now that you are last, definitely not the least, I will also give you the opportunity to set the tone for why we're here.
Oh, thank you, Anita. I think you're one of the first people who pronounce my name very well. The middle name, Say. A lot of people say Sai, and I'm very impressed. Let me say, the first time I saw you was at the Economic Forum in Lomé, and I was really captivated. Your passion for the sub-region, your developmental. Having said that, I would like to express the regret of Mr. President, who should have been here. Unfortunately, there were other engagements, and he asked me to represent him. Anita, we're very much passionate about this. I'm very much honored here to be here with these distinguished individuals. Before coming here, we had some tete-a-tete, and I realized that they come to the table with a lot, in store. So I promise your audience that we will have some brainstorming to do. Having said that, I would like to welcome all of you today to the second edition of the President's Forum. We started last year. This year's theme is road mapping infrastructure development in ECOWAS. Now, we all know how important infrastructure is. It's a study by the World Bank that says that a 1% increase in electricity will lead to between 2 to 4% rises in GDP. And then again, also a 40% increase in productivity. We see that the sub-region has a population of over 400 million. We see the difficulty, the challenges that we have in infrastructure. Today, we're not just going to talk about the challenges, we're going to talk about some of the work that we've done on it. We see that the West African sub-region is beset by a lot of difficulties. Nigeria, for example, which is the biggest economy in the region, also the biggest economy in Africa, has an infrastructure deficit of more than half of its GDP. Exactly 51.2% of its GDP. Cote d'Ivoire, which is the third largest economy, has a deficit of around 14 billion, which is 22.8% of its GDP. So you see, it's huge. Now, their electricity access is very constrained as well. You see that in West Africa, only Ghana and Cote d'Ivoire have access to electricity of around 80%. The rest of it, if you look at the indexes, are very skewed up. Now, so we have a lot of challenges, but can we surmount this? We see that we're talking about regional integration. We're talking about AFTA. These are all these things that we can leverage. So one of the things that we would like to talk about today, which is part of the thing we're going to talk about, is modernizing our infrastructure. Now, we talk about the fourth industrial revolution. Now, Africa cannot remain behind. Smart cities, SDGs 11. Today, in our country, to be able to transition to these things, you need to have stable electricity. In the absence of that, today the whole world has turned to AI. If we are not in a position to give electricity to our people, how can we transition? So I think, Anita, this is something that we are passionate about. This is something that we're doing. Of course, during the course of the discussion, you will hear from us what we have done or what we are doing, the challenges we are doing, how we want to leverage support from multilateral like the World Bank and the private sector to see how we can intervene in the sector. So having said that, I will say, Anita, I would like to thank all of you And I'm very much happy and honored that Mr. President was able to ask me to join this conversation, because my department is responsible for some of these things that happen. So we promise to set the stage. We promise to talk about all of these things. And I would like to say I'm very much happy and passionate about the way you are passionate about Africa. Thank you.
Listen, McDonald, thank you very much for your words, your kind words. Somebody has got to take the lead. Somebody has got to be at the forefront, and we have a lot of work to do. Magnus, I'm hearing from McDonald challenges. This conversation isn't only about the downside, but before you get to the upside, you do have to describe what you had to surmount in order to be where you are. So I want to kind of highlight the key challenges that your company has faced in, this process of modernization. But take us to how you were able to circumvent these challenges, Magnus.
Thank you very much. So for representing Darling, we need to appreciate that we are a service provider. Okay, so we usually service in government, for that matter, multilaterals. So we have to go through processes to be selected to engage in projects. And typically, people may not know it takes sometimes close to 2 years to finish a successful procurement. Okay, and one of the challenges which we all talk about, even some of the biggest and wealthy nations go through, is funding. I am not sure every country has enough to surmount the programs they have. But towards the end, I would like to do a bit of moralizing, on this issue, because I also believe that we need proper fiduciary processes to help us to be able to manage what we are able to collect as a people. Okay, so funding is a constraint. The other thing is also regulatory issues. If you even working as a consultant in my own country, here Ghana, there's a lot one goes through to pull through a project, let alone to work across the sub-region. Challenges with language, of course, and sometimes people not willing to accept each other, even though we are Africans. So all of these contribute to making it difficult, as it were, to pull through the issue of managing our or modernizing our infrastructure. The issues of environment, social, and governance cannot be underestimated. We should be able to deliver projects with minimal or minimum impact on the people we engage in. So these are some of the challenges that we go through. But over the years, what has happened is that you need early engagement. To be successful, you need very good early engagement on the issues of ESG, okay? Because today, you can't just walk through, like in the past, walk through communities and do what you like and so on. You need serious and consistent engagements with communities, on the issues of social impacts, okay? On the issues of environmental impact. So you need to start your project planning early enough, to deal with those issues. The other challenge I mentioned in terms of finance, okay, which I will say that, like I said, governments will have to go through with the support of multi-donors. On the other hand, some of the projects have had to be financed through FDB, like finance, design, and build, where you get other private financing to support project. And I must say that one of them, which we have successfully pulled through, almost 70% complete, is the Bolgatanga Bokon Polymercom project, which goes to the Togo border. This is a 110-kilometer project, which the financing was by GOG at some point, and government at some point realized that, look, they couldn't finance the project. So the contractor, together with us, actually put together a document to be able to do finance, design, and build, to mobilize the financing in order that we can pull through this project. So there is always a way if the will is there. But again, most of these projects are public projects, and you need certainly government financing. And I think when we get to talk about other ways of looking at other finance, we will discuss issues of PPPs and blended financing. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Magnus. And so as Magnus is speaking, the word innovation, innovative solutions, these two words come to me, Rajesh. That's why I come to you. We're talking about, okay, the problem is in front of us. And in this case, the problem being the pleasant challenge being modernization. Let's talk to some examples around your innovative solutions for modernizing infrastructure here in the region.
First of all, let me thank you for the question, and also I would like to appreciate what my fellow colleagues have told. I think that sets the tone for this meeting. And of course, with infrastructure modernization in ECOWAS, we are very much committed as an organization because we have been present in this region for last 20 years. So we don't only look after what is required for the community, but what is going to help the community in the longer run, in the future. And that is what our lookout has been always, right from day one. So in this context, we have a very simple project which I would like to quote here, which we are currently doing, in fact, in Sierra Leone. It's a 103 megawatt combined cycle power plant. There's a developer in place. There's a PPA backed by the government of Sierra Leone. It's funded by US Development Finance Corporation as well as EBID. Both are joint partners in this, and we are the main EPC contractors. So the innovative solutions, what is to have a PPP framework in place first. That is a power purchase agreement between a developer and the government of Sierra Leone, and which should be backed by a proper financial resource, which a political risk insurance as well, so as to keep the funders at ease, so that the project goes on without any hiccups. And at the same time, there are a lot of other solutions. What we are doing is we have got the OEM partners in place, that is Siemens Energy, who are giving us the steam and gas turbines, which actually help in reducing the emissions, and at the same time giving us a better output in terms of power. And so these are small things which we take into consideration while planning a project, as in how it can impact the community, how it can impact the climate. He spoke about ESG. It is something which we actually incorporate in our each and every project, whatever we do. The third innovation would be to building the local capacity of training. Generally, there's a feeling, everywhere, that when foreign contractors come in, they come in with a lot of expats, but we don't do that. We are a strict no for expats, because we try to generate local employment. In fact, most of the projects we have in Sierra Leone, we intend to have around 2,000 to 3,000 Sierra Leonean workers working on the project. That is something which will give us a lot of happiness in terms of delivering that project. Fourth would be to make sure the plant is run by the local Sierra Leoneans once the plant is constructed. So we do the knowledge transfer, so that they have the knowledge transfer to run the plant even in our absence, when the contractors leaves the place. So the plant is not isolated, it is not kept in isolation there. So that's something. These are small things, but it makes a lot of difference in the end. And so this actually covers the entire gamut of the project life cycle, as in how we want to proceed in this.
And with such a burgeoning youth dynamic from the continent, you want to ensure that you don't only build for them, but you empower them so they can build for themselves, or build for the continent.
So that is where we also think about any project which we commission. It is for the future generations and the future, looking after the future economic as well as the environmental responsibility taking into consideration. That is what we look into it. It's not something what we can do now, but what is going to happen in next 10 years or 20 years, that is what makes all the difference.
Falling very nicely into the Agenda 2063 framework is what I would say. Robert, a lot of perceptions around the World Bank. Everybody thinks they know what the World Bank does, but I say the World Bank does so much that unless a World Bank person tells you what they do, everything else is an assumption. So I believe that this is one of the best places to kind of highlight some of your success stories. I want to know what the role of the World Bank is in modernizing infrastructure in ECOWAS, and I would be happy for some examples if you could cite them.
Sure. Thanks very much, Anita. As you said, we are spread across many sectors in many countries. And one of the things that we're trying to do now is to focus our efforts more and be more selective to get greater impact at scale. So I want to mention one of those examples that's related to infrastructure here. And it's something we call Mission 300, or M300. This is a bold and ambitious new initiative that the World Bank, together with the African Development Bank, have just launched. And the objective is to provide access to electricity for 300 million Africans by 2030. So our current estimates are that there are about 600 million people in sub-Saharan Africa without access to electricity. We're going to try over the next 6 years to address half of that, address that gap. So 300 million, the World Bank is providing to commit $5 billion a year to reach the goal of 250 new connections, and the African Development Bank is providing the other 50 million. And so together 300 million. Our current financing in access to energy is about 3 billion a year. So now we're increasing to 5 billion a year. So quite a significant growth there in the financing in that sector. And we're very excited about it. In addition, the IFC, which is our private sector arm, they're going to contribute another 1 billion a year, working with the private sector directly to leverage and private finance and to reach that goal of providing access. As colleagues have already said, you know, the energy deficit in Africa has enormous impacts on household welfare, on competitiveness of businesses, on the ability of economies to grow, and on poverty reduction, ultimately. So we think this is a critical sector for us to be focusing on. I want to make one point throughout this discussion today, too, is that, and colleague has already mentioned it, but it's not just about the finance. It's not just about the investment. That's necessary, but not sufficient. We also need policy and regulatory reforms to create the enabling environment for success. So another thing that we're doing is through our development policy finance operations, which are also known as budget support operations. We agree on a number of key policy priority reforms with governments. And once those reforms are completed, then we provide that financing. One example of that in Ghana is the focus on reforming the electricity utility. So the electricity utility in Ghana has a number of challenges, including on collections, actual billing for electricity provided, collections of that electricity, and also transparency and accountability. So as a result of those challenges, the electricity sector in Ghana is currently costing the government about 2 percentage points of GDP in fiscal transfers that essentially have to go each year to bail out the sector. So when I was in Washington a week and a half ago with Minister of Finance Amin Adam, we signed a new operation, which is called an Energy Program for Results operation with Ghana, $260 million that will address utility reform, other policy reforms in the sector, prepaid meters, and so on, to improve the efficiency of the sector. We have similar support to the electricity utilities in Liberia and Sierra Leone, for example. So for us, it's about scaling up our financing and then supporting the key policy and regulatory reforms in each of these countries to ensure efficiency and effectiveness in the use of both public and private resources.
Thank you so much, Robert. And you bring up energy, you brought it up a few times, and that kind of brings me back to you, McDonald, where I'm eager to know how, EBID is addressing the infrastructure modernization as far as, energy is concerned. Let's also add transportation, and let's also, talk about telecommunications if we can, of course, in the ECOWAS region. Tell us the EBID story.
Oh, thank you, Anita. So, the whole thing about it is about the modernization of infrastructure. We are aware that if West Africa is to make transition to the fourth industrial revolution, there has to be a march towards modernization. Today, for the first time in the bank's history, last year we were able to come up with a policy on ESG, as Andy talked about. So we have incorporated those into our framework, and in all of our policies, we make sure we discuss with governments and other regulators. And I'm happy that Robert brought about easing of regulatory, constraints. These are some of the things that we're seeing. Why is it that we have such deficit? Why is it that we have such deficit? Coming back to the system of electricity, I think, Anita, the thing that does it the most is to have energy assets. We live in a sub-region where only 2 countries out of 15 have at least 80% access, universal access, which is today the backbone of the fourth industrial revolution or the AI revolution is constant electricity. In the absence of constant electricity, there cannot be a transition to that. And the AR economy is making a lot. Coming back to your question, telecommunications, infrastructure, how do we modernize? So EBID has built into some of its, policy to see that, and we discuss with these providers. They say, look, our objective, our strategy. If you look at our strategic plan, for example, the 2021-2025 strategy, is saying that we want to see where the growth poles are. Realize that when the countries came from, COVID, they were all, beset by problems and what have you. So we try to, encourage them to put into their programs and planning stages things that will modernize infrastructure so that the physical barrier to these things can be curtailed as a way of us or they, transitioning to the global modern economy. Because 50, 30 years down the road, we realize that the AI revolution will take place. And we do not want Africa to remain, by the wayside. So in all of our project implementation or project design, we discuss with these people and tell them, look, this is something you will need to do. Today, for example, we work with some of the ministries and agencies and telecommunication and tell them that the objective of these things is to do. But our key thing is the ESG, to see that all of our programs today, like I said, we brought up a policy document last year that supports the ESG, because today all of our donors, all of our financial partners, they're asking for this, and it also comes with component of modernization. So EBID is aware that in order for the economies of our region to transition to the fourth industrial revolution, there has to be constant electricity. So we want to solve the fundamentals, the bread and butter issue. And the bread and butter issue means that you should intervene in the energy sector. Because once you address the problem in the energy sector, you'll be able to address the problem in telecommunications, you'll be able to address the problem in healthcare, you'll be able to address the problem with telecommunications by way of internet, because the internet itself is telecommunication. So once that happens, you see that you have solved a problem by using simple means, which is access to electricity. In my opening statement, I told you how important electricity was. Stated by Robert Bank, that just a 1% increase in electricity asset will lead to 2% growth in GDP, 40% rise in productivity. Now, Nigeria, for example, Nigeria has an electricity deficit of more than 50% of GDP, which means that if you can solve the issue in Nigeria, Nigeria could reach $1 trillion in gross domestic product. But a huge portion of Nigeria's economic output is being constrained by the lack of electricity. So once that problem is solved, and then because of Nigeria multiply effect, Benin, Togo, Ghana, they will all be affected positively in terms of the transition to all of these things. If Nigeria is able to solve at least 45% of its energy need today, which will then metamorphose into modernizing all of these things. So the basic thing about it, and I like what Robert said, the effort they are making to show that you solve the issue of electricity and energy in the sub-region. In that way, you solve the problem.
Thank you so much, McDonald. Esteemed guests, allow us to switch the gears a little bit. I mean, AFCFTA has been at the tip of our tongues, since 2021, and there is light at the end of the tunnel. So I want to kind of focus on the concept of facilitating trade, which obviously moves to facilitating movement of Africans. In this conversation, of course, we're talking about ECOWAS, and perhaps let's look at, possible solutions that can fast track the efficiency, maybe I should call it that, of the AFCFTA. Magnus, I come to you. What steps has your organization taken to overcome administrative and infrastructure barriers to trade?
Thank you very much for that. And I think I will address this by an example of a project that we participated, which was also sponsored by the World Bank. So this had to do with the road safety remedials and rest stops, for example. And like I said, here you are working in 5 countries, Nigeria, Ghana, of course, Togo, Benin, and Abidjan. Okay, so one of the ways we had to adopt in order to overcome administrative challenges was to look at, for example, say joint ventures, okay, because you usually have local firms or individuals from the respective countries who can help with the issues of local and regulatory issues in particular country, because it does pose a challenge sometimes. Like I did mention earlier, sometimes you're not too familiar with the location, but again, the knowledge is important to share. Now, once I talk about this, let me share one key thing you find. It's evident around this table that we need infrastructure, but I believe strongly that the quality and quantity of any country's infrastructure has a direct proportion to the quality and quantity of their engineering professionals. Now, if you take Europe, for example, you have one engineer to 800 people. If you take the US, it's about 1 to 200. If you take Africa, it's 1 to 40,000. 1 to 40,000. Now, if we want to seriously modernize our infrastructure, we cannot underestimate what education will do. We need to be very, very vigorous and strategic in building a strong engineering professional within the continent, of course, within the respective countries. And on this project, which I mentioned, we had to look at the road safety issues on the Abidjan-Lagos corridor, and then we also designed nearly 8 rest stops in Ghana. Now, soon after that, what I realized was that Togo built their section of 60 kilometers, Benin built their section of about 138. Now, prior to that, you would do almost like 18 hours to travel from Accra to Lagos. Today, we are doing like 9 hours, but I still believe that it's not unacceptable to travel between Ghana and Lagos for 9 hours on the road. It is not acceptable, even though I would say that the project kind of identified areas that we needed to do remedial works. It is still not acceptable. There's more room for improvement. I must also say that there are capacity gaps, and sometimes it's necessary to borrow this. Currently, we are in a project which is sponsored by the World Bank I mentioned, and we actually in a joint venture with Logit, a Brazilian company, and a Mexican company, because they are experienced with delivering bus rapid transit. But we are a local firm, also very well versed in local issues and so on. So these JVs and synergies does help, to break the gaps and also transfer knowledge as we move forward. And I think that this is the way to go.
Wonderful. Well, with that said, we're going for a quick commercial break. This is the second EBID President's Roundtable. My name is Anita Erskine. It's wonderful to have these esteemed guests here, and do stay tuned. We have a lot more to share with you after this.
Across West Africa, the ECOWAS Bank for Investment and Development, EBID, is the cornerstone institution dedicated to socio-economic progress across communities. Through strategic financing and investments across ECOWAS member states, EBID has engendered impactful change in diverse sectors such as energy, agriculture, and infrastructural development. Projects financed by EBID have alleviated poverty, created jobs, and influenced the scope of business development across local communities. EBID shapes the economic landscape of ECOWAS member states. Our operational activities are intended to lay the foundation for the sustainable development of member states of the community through financing of regional and national projects in the areas of infrastructure, rural development, social sector, industry, and services. Our philosophy on investment is an effective blend of financial and developmental objectives that ensure that all projects are beneficial for both the region and investors. Our business model enables a diversified portfolio of investment for both private and public sector clients with a clearly defined strategy that aims to transform livelihoods. EBID collaborates with governments and key partners in both the private and public sectors to ensure sustainable progress and development. These partnerships have powered many projects that have harnessed technology and innovated financial models to drive sustainable progress and development. We see ourselves as a catalyst for lasting change. As such, we consistently measure the positive impact our investments and projects have on the environment to spur on future projects. EBID's local knowledge, proven experience, and broader mandate are key drivers for its competitiveness, as well as access to attractive projects in the West African region. With EBID, ECOWAS member states will experience an economically strong, industrialized, prosperous, and globalized West Africa. Together, we can be united for progress. Visit our website www.bidc-ebid.org or our social media platforms LinkedIn BIDC-EBID, Facebook EBID Official, YouTube BIDC_EBID, Twitter BIDC_EBID. EBID, transforming ECOWAS communities. Across West Africa, the ECOWAS Bank for Investment and Development, EBID, is the cornerstone institution.
You are warmly welcome. This is the second edition of EBID's President Roundtable, with a special focus on this conversation on road mapping infrastructure development in ECOWAS. And I'm surrounded by my esteemed guests. And if you're just joining us, let me just tell you who they are one more time. I have Mr. McDonald Seiguanu, who is the Director of the Research and Strategic Planning Department of EBID. I have Mr. Magnus Lincoln Kwashi, the CEO of Dell & Consult Limited. Dr. Robert Taliercio, who is the Country Director, Ghana, Liberia, and Sierra Leone World Bank Group, is with us here in the studio. Last, definitely not the least, Mr. Rajesh Nair, who is the Regional Head, Group Business Development, Shaporji, Palonji, and Company Private Limited. And Rajesh, I left you for the last because we're in the second conversation about facilitating trade and definitely facilitating people as well, people moving around. And I would like you to focus on perhaps the role of transportation infrastructure when you're talking about facilitating trade and movement of people. And if you have any examples in the ECOWAS region that you can share with us, Rajesh.
Perfect. I think I have a perfect example for this question. And let me just reiterate what everybody has said. The whole purpose of this event is to, integrate all the countries, ECOWAS countries coming together and doing business together. And that actually helps in having a good transportation network in place, whether it is road or railway. It actually helps in connecting markets. It connects the cross-border businesses. In our case, what we have done is just a small example. In our case, what we have done exactly is we have constructed a railway line from Tema to Pakadan, which is one of the game-changing projects, if I may say, in next coming to 5 to 10 years. Because people might remember it may not have an immediate impact right now, but going forward, maybe in 5 to 10 years, people may understand what was the ideology behind this project. So I'll just give you a background about this project. This project is part of a multimodal transportation network, starting from Tema, going up to Pakadan, which is at the Volta Lake. From Volta Lake, you take use the lake for transporting goods, and from Volta Lake going up to Buipe, from Buipe to Tamale, and Tamale to Paga. And this is one of the rail network which was identified as part of the ECOWAS infrastructure corridor. It is one of the game-changing blueprint what ECOWAS had set some long time back. And this project we started in 2017 and we have almost completed now. In fact, we will be soon commissioning the project. This actually, the whole idea behind this project is to connect from south to the north of the country, going from Tema up to Pakadan and going to reach to the neighboring countries, that is Burkina Faso, Mali, Niger, which are landlocked countries. As of today, Abidjan is sharing a lot of profits in transporting goods to Burkina, Mali, and Niger, to these landlocked countries. Over a period of time, Ghana will take over this market share from them once this line goes through and the other lines also starts functioning from Buipe to Tamale, where we will be starting. God willing, we may have to start something there as well. Buipe to Tamale and Tamale to Paga. This would actually change the scenario of the entire ECOWAS region, and something which I think which will help us to understand where we are standing in due course of time.
You know, and I think within me, I'm feeling the excitement because we're not just talking about a potential.
No.
It is something that has actually
Happened.
began, and people are benefiting
Yes.
from this project. So talking about benefiting, Robert, let me talk to you about some examples, perhaps, that from the World Bank Group that you can use to highlight improvements in trade infrastructure. Can you share some examples with us?
Sure, and fully agree with the question that lack of infrastructure currently, as well as weaknesses in policy and regulatory regimes, are impeding countries' abilities to take full advantage of the AFCFTA, and we're definitely supporting, very keen on supporting them to do that further. So I just want to mention a few examples in transportation, digital, regional power markets, and then trade facilitation. These are some of the areas that we think are vital here. So I want to give an example on Sierra Leone, as colleagues have mentioned it already. We're supporting a project worth 74 million called Connectivity and Agriculture Marketing Infrastructure, which will help invest in road networks that provide rural access, as well as access to agricultural markets to promote regional trade in Sierra Leone. And I think one of the important aspects here is connecting communities that are a bit isolated currently. So some of these roads and bridges and other agricultural market infrastructure will be very important in that respect. We're similarly supporting 2 projects in Liberia for worth a total of 377 million, with a focus on climate resilient transportation development, again, because the countries in our region are very much affected by this natural disaster and increasingly climate change. So this has to be an aspect. You mentioned innovation, Anita. We absolutely vital for innovation is the digital infrastructure. So just a few words about that. Supporting affordable, high quality broadband, inclusive and safe digital public infrastructure. So cybersecurity policy and capacity. And then digitization of high impact use cases, both digital financial services for private sector, but also e-government, digital government services to reach citizens. So along those lines, we have a $200 million project in Ghana called the Digital Expansion Project that is expanding access to broadband, as well as enhancing the efficiency and experience of key digital public services, and also strengthening the digital innovation ecosystem by reaching out to young entrepreneurs, providing some skills training there. My colleague mentioned a World Bank study. So I'd like to return the favor and mention a study that ECOWAS is doing on regional interconnectivity in the digital space. So we're currently using this study, as well as our own digital economy assessments, to support a regional operation called the West Africa Regional Digital Integration Project, which invests in digital infrastructure and services in Liberia, Sierra Leone, Niger, and Benin. So again, bringing to the ability to these countries to actually leapfrog, not just to do the basics, but to leapfrog to more digital innovation. My last example is the West Africa Power Pool, which again, ECOWAS supports as a cooperation of energy companies across Western Africa. And we're working with them in a number of countries and a number of interconnections between countries to establish a reliable power grid and also a common market for electricity, which is again an important aspect of trade itself, but also important for growing trade in other sectors. So we're currently designing a Ghana Cote d'Ivoire interconnection project, which supports power system integration, regulation, capacity, and so on. And that's one that will be going to our board in the next 3 to 6 months. My final point on policy, trade facilitation. So we know that we can't just look at physical investments. As I said, we also have to look at customs reform, the business environment, and how to further harmonize across countries. So in Liberia, where my colleague is from, we're working with the private sector to identify the constraints that they're facing. So one of the constraints that's come up there is high demurrage charges. So essentially charges when your shipment cannot be offloaded in time or you cannot upload a new shipment in time, that these companies are incurring millions of dollars worth of these charges in Liberia. So we're supporting the Liberian government through a project that's exactly on this point of trade facilitation. And one of the key reforms here is introducing a single window so that the private sector, when they're trading, they only have to deal with one single window interface to get all of the requirements done, policy, regulatory, pay fees, and so on, rather than having to go to a bunch of different agencies, which is inefficient and time consuming. So I think automating these processes through a single window in Liberia, and again, we've seen this have impact in many countries across the world. It'll also work in Liberia, but it's an important component. It's the kind of policy regulatory component to all the hard infrastructure that we're talking about.
Yeah, absolutely. McDonald, not because we're speaking about Liberia, but you just happen to be the person that's going to answer this question.
Yeah.
But I'm very excited about what's happening in Liberia right now. Are you excited about what's happening in Liberia?
Oh yes, I am. I mean,
I put you on the spot with that one.
No, I am. I am. And I would like to thank Robert for that. EBID, I would like to, based on what Robert said, ECOWAS and the bank are working on something called Sigma. Sigma is, as a way of promoting intra-regional trade, as a way of coming up with, promoting intra-regional trade. And Anita, let me set this stage. We have one of the lowest indices of intra-regional trade in the world. Even by African standard, the only region that probably better than would be COMESA, but we are less than 12%, intra-regional trade. So what that means is that even if we are talking about a single currency, there's no way a single currency can work in an environment where you have intra-regional trade as low as 12% or below 12%. Now, scholars have said that to attempt to have intra-regional trade, you need to be around, say, 70 to 77% of GDP. 70 to intra-regional trade, and you are 12%. So having a single currency is not feasible in such an environment. So efforts have been made at the level of EBID and ECOWAS to ensure that, goods in transition, can be treated in such a way that they are giving urgent attention. And Robert talked about the facility in Monrovia and rest of it. So I thought it was a very important thing for us to talk about in terms of trade facilitation. Now, relative to trade facilitation, EBID has made a lot of strides, and thanks to the Indian government, we have gotten lines of credit amounting to about $1 billion. And most of that money went to supporting, cross-border infrastructure, roads, and what have you. Even here in Ghana, between Aflao and Accra, one of the roads, one of the best roads. When I went to Lomé about 11 years ago, the road was not as good. So these are things that EBID is doing to ensure that we have connectivity in the region. We have connectivity in the region. And one thing that we haven't even mentioned is the fact that we have also been talking about sea transport. Anita, this is one of the regions in the world where if you send something from America, it will reach maybe 3 months before if you send something from Togo to Liberia, even though the distance is short. Let me also talk about what EBID has done. You hear about ASCAI. EBID is the founder of ASCAI, which today, and I'm amazed every time I go to travel, today Lomé has become a hub, Lomé has become a hub. So EBID has been able to ease transportation, air transportation, because so many people can get connected to so many places. Before then, anybody wanting to go to Niamey from Togo will have to go to Paris. But today you can go straight to Niamey. In terms of financial integration, EBID was also the founding member. Let me bring that to your attention. Maybe of what you call today ECOBAN. We are the founder of ECOBAN. So before all of these things about regional integration and what have you, EBID and ECOWAS have been at the forefront of seeing how we can bring people together. Before 30 years ago, all of the banks in the sub-region were foreign banks, all of them. And when the crisis came, all of them folded up and went. Today, we have successfully managed to have a bank of our own, which is not just in one country, but in a lot of countries. So we may have smaller, ticket, but we have done a lot in trying to do this. So what we are doing, the objective of the president's roundtable here is to see how you all, especially Raval and you all who come from this background, to see how it's not just the physical infrastructure, but soft infrastructure, how we do these things to connect ourselves. Now, like I talk about air travel, it was difficult before. It was haphazard. Today, with ASCAI, things have settled down. So in terms of, I wanted you to ask me that question so I can showcase my bank a little bit, but so we have been able to do that. And what we are asking for is partnership. Recently, we're in Washington, D.C., and we are working with a number of partners to see how we make our bank or continue to make our bank relevant in terms of all of these things. We are aware that physical infrastructure is very important, but the soft infrastructure such as banks, air transport, and sea transport. One of the key things missing today is sea transport. And we are working, EBID is working along with the Blue Marine to see how we can ease sea transport. And in that way, EBID and the ECOWAS will be able to bring together the community. So it's very important. I thought to bring this precision.
And I like that because, as I'm going through our social media pages, in fact, somebody has mentioned, John, thank you very much for your question, says, given that many West African countries are debt unsustainable, how do we get around to sourcing financing? John, I will come to your question because this last part is actually talking about pooling resources. Let me go to Kofi's question. And McDonald, you can answer a part of it, but I'll also bring a part of it to you, Magnus, because it talks about public-private partnership, and you just mentioned the partnerships that are required. Kofi says public-private partnership has been touted as innovative or as an innovative model for infrastructure development. In your assessment, why do we have so few PPPs and why are they so slowly paced? What is the best way forward? Perhaps I just use your submission right now as a stepping stone into Kofi's question.
Thank you. Let me thank Kofi for that question. It's very important. Now, we know that and let me be quick. Most of our countries today are almost bridging the ECOWAS standard on the debt to GDP ratio. Most of our countries are out of 70% or approaching that, which is worrying for us. And how do you solve this problem? We understand that if you look in the region, if you look at financial deepening, okay, you see that if you look at the ratio of M2, which is broad money to GDP, it's one of the lowest in it. So domestic savings in the sub-region is very low. And then again, most of our countries too are on programs with the IMF and the World Bank. They cannot borrow at a particular level. So the way that we can intervene into infrastructure, I think will be with the PPP. Now, let me give you an example of the PPP that EBID did with, there's a bridge, in those of you who have been to Abidjan, there's a bridge called the Henry Konan Bridge. Henry Konan Bridge connects one part of Abidjan to the other, the mainland. Plateau. Before, it took 2 hours of commute. Today, it's just 15 minutes. EBID was one of the financiers in that particular thing. It was a PPP with a company called Socroprint. We partnered with them and we eased that problem. So, Kofi, you're right. PPP is very important. The reason it is slow, and Robert talked about it, is the structuring. I think we need capacity building in structuring. If you go to Europe and America, PPP is well advanced. Most of the roads, most of the infrastructure in these countries, we read about PPP, they're all delivered by PPP. But it has to be well structured. The thing about it, again, is that our private sector is not as strong as the private sector in those places. I can talk about the M2, the financial deepening. We have very low financial deepening. In fact, as a matter of fact, we do not have a lot of private capital. So it's about raising private capital. So I think governments need to set up the enabling environment to enable the private sector to thrive. So what EBID has done in our strategy, in our 2021-2025 strategy, we said that our intervention will be to the level of 65%. So public sector intervention is just 35%. In terms of disbursement, the ratio is 60-40. So you see, EBID is much more interested in bringing up the private sector, because if you cannot have PPP in the absence of a strong private sector. Other than that, you just bring foreign companies who will come, and the benefit will not accrue to the domestic. Yeah. So I think while PPP is important, it is also important to realize that we want to empower domestic businesses. People like my brother there, Kwachi. If Kwachi becomes up, we want to make more millionaires, African indigenous millionaires. Mm-hmm. That's the objective of a bank. As a banker, every time I go to bank, I want to see that we are creating more, indigenous billionaires and millionaires. In that way, the return will come about. So the reason PPP are slow because they do not have the capital, and it is in the interest of institutions like EBID to ensure that we bring up more, domestic business people who will have the private capital, who can have access to, foreign financial markets and the rest of it. In that way, we'll be able to structure them well. But like I said, you have to have the regulatory environment, you have to have the manpower, you have to have the training, you have to have the wherewithal. So yeah. I think, I hope I've answered Kofi's question.
No, you've answered perfectly. And Magnus, I'm just going to ask you to kind of throw in your perspective as well, just before we go for a commercial break.
Well, I just like to piggyback where McDonald left off. PPPs are crucial, but again, the issue is structuring the PPPs, and we need capacity in this area. The other thing I'll talk about probably is also blended financing, which is also not very popular here, but in other places it does. Again, you look at all of these things, these areas, particularly within our region, I think that there are capacity gaps, and we need to find out how we can fill those gaps in order that we can raise sustainable and, of course, resilient financing to address our infrastructure needs.
Wonderful. We're going for a quick commercial break. And when we come back, we move into the last part of this conversation. I like to call it pooling resources for sustainable infrastructure. The question, Kofi, that you sent has birthed, there's a wonderful element around PPPs, around financing. Essentially, how do we fast track where we need to go? If I may break it down. We'll be back after the break.
Across West Africa, the ECOWAS Bank for Investment and Development, EBID, is the cornerstone institution dedicated to socio-economic progress across communities. Through strategic financing and investments across ECOWAS member states, EBID has engendered impactful change in diverse sectors such as energy, agriculture, and infrastructural development. Projects financed by EBID have alleviated poverty, created jobs, and influenced the scope of business development across local communities. EBID shapes the economic landscape of ECOWAS member states. Our operational activities are intended to lay the foundation for the sustainable development of member states of the community through financing of regional and national projects in the areas of infrastructure, rural development, social sector, industry, and services. Our philosophy on investment is an effective blend of financial and developmental objectives that ensure that all projects are beneficial for both the region and investors. Our business model enables a diversified portfolio of investment for both private and public sector clients with a clearly defined strategy that aims to transform livelihoods. EBID collaborates with governments and key partners in both the private and public sectors to ensure sustainable progress and development. These partnerships have powered many projects that have harnessed technology and innovated financial models to drive sustainable progress and development. We see ourselves as a catalyst for lasting change. As such, we consistently measure the positive impact our investments and projects have on the environment to spur on future projects. EBID's local knowledge, proven experience, and broader mandate are key drivers for its competitiveness, as well as access to attractive projects in the West African region. With EBID, ECOWAS member states will experience an economically strong, industrialized, prosperous, and globalized West Africa. Together, we can be united for progress. Visit our website www.bidc-ebid.org or our social media platforms LinkedIn BIDC-EBID, Facebook EBID Official, YouTube BIDC_EBID, Twitter BIDC_EBID. EBID, transforming ECOWAS communities.
You are welcome back to the EBID's President's Roundtable, the second edition. My name is Anita Erskine. We've had a wonderful conversation around infrastructure. And like I said, earlier on, how to fast track where we want to go. Clearly, when you pay attention to the Sustainable Development Goals, goal number 17, partnerships, collaborations are essential. One organization or one pillar cannot keep the building, in this case, the continent of Africa, standing on its own. So that brings us to the conversation around financing and PPPs, but not without going to your questions on Twitter, Facebook, YouTube. Thank you very much for sending those in. Robert, I put you on the spot with this one. I have a question from Samantha. How can ECOWAS attract sustainable financing for infrastructure projects, particularly in countries with lower investment ratings, and what role can the World Bank play?
Very much. That's a great question. That's one that we think about all the time because we know that official development assistance is not enough for the reasons you said. We also know that public finance is not enough. So we need to attract the private sector in. ECOWAS itself has estimated that private finance only contributes 5% of infrastructure financing currently. So we need to increase that. So I agree with what McDonald and Magnus have already said on PPPs. And we're working in a number of countries to strengthen the institutional, legal, and regulatory frameworks around PPPs. So in Liberia, for example, we're currently supporting the government to design a new PPP law, and then we'll help them with the regulations as well and the capacity. So this has to be a part of the solution. We've heard from private finance institutions that they don't have the right instruments in place to manage risks and liquidity. And we also know that they're not seeing enough good quality deals out there. So part of what we're doing in this space is guarantees. So the World Bank Group has just announced this year a new single unified guarantee platform. So previously we had different parts of our organization, IDA, MIGA, IFC, offering different guarantees. We heard from the private sector loud and clear that it was confusing and it was not agile. So now we've combined that all under one window. And these will be a combination of guarantees to cover political, commercial, and credit risks. Exactly what the question has addressed. Our guarantees have also been used to extend loan maturities and lower the cost of loans as well. So I think these are important instruments. We'd like to greatly expand the guarantee business. They're not always straightforward or without challenge, but nonetheless, we need to continue to develop them, ramp them up, and continue seeing them across our countries. On the PPP side, and Magnus has mentioned here their involvement in a project in Kumasi, a World Bank project. This is a bus rapid transport project in Kumasi that we're currently designing. So it's in the design phase, but we hope that it'll be approved by our board in the next 6 to 12 months. It's the Kumasi Urban Mobility and Accessibility Project, and it will focus on greening public transport in Kumasi. It'll help to address mobility and accessibility challenges along key transport corridors. It'll also reduce carbon emissions by using electric buses. So again, bringing in the climate angle. There's a really good example that we have from Dakar, the Dakar Bus Rapid Transport, which was a project that the World Bank financed, but did not finance alone. I went to see it in September, and it was very impressive. So the Dakar BRT generated support from not only the World Bank, but also the European Investment Bank, IFC MIGA, the government, and the private sector. And the private sector concessionaire, through a 15-year concession agreement, committed $144 million equivalent to the project in order to procure the electric bus fleet. So this is the kind of approach we want to take in Kumasi as well. As I said, because private finance is not enough. We're currently we're going to put in $200 million from IDA for Kumasi, but the project estimate is $450 million. So we need to leverage that money and bring in an additional $250 million. But we're optimistic about being able to do that.
Absolutely, and the optimism is globally or broadly shared. This question from YouTube didn't get the name. I think, Magnus, you could answer this. Given the current global economic landscape, how can ECOWAS and EBID ensure resilience in infrastructure projects to withstand economic shocks and promote long-term growth in the region?
Oh, thank you again, Anita. It's a very good question. I think if you look at one of the themes of the bank's West African Development Outlook is how we build resilience against recurring shocks. There are recurring shocks. Every year there's one shock or another. I mean, a few articles back in the Economist talked about that. Now, before I answer that question, let me just quickly address myself to something Robert said in the question I was asked about how, what would be the flexibility of some of these countries. We know today that most of our countries are other countries. That means they cannot borrow on the commercial window. They are poor countries. They haven't graduated to commercial loan. So I think working with our partners like the World Bank, there has to be some level of flexibility. Recently at the annual meetings of the World Bank and IMF, most finance ministers are calling for that flexibility they need in the face of these shocks that were brought upon by the COVID-19, the meaningful of COVID-19. So there has to be a way that we can work in sync with multilateral agencies like the World Bank to see how you can allow African countries, to have the flexibility. Like he said, I'm happy that he said that. Look, in the face of these things, ODA, cannot solve it. There's no longer a concessional loan. So there has to be a way where we can work in sync with them, either to raise or look at it from a considerable part of it. Other than that, there's no way African countries can develop with the present model we have, because most of our countries are export. I mean, they are export. They depend on export in their raw form. So we're not really building the economies. What we are doing is just we are at the vagaries. We are at the vagaries of the Western demanders for our goods, for our exports. So we have to look at that particular. Now, coming to the point of raising the point, Joe and I used to be in the resource mobilization. Today, EBID, despite its not too much investment grade rating, we have been able to engage with partners. EBID is going on the financial market to raise funds, but not at competitive rate, because we are not, according to the rating agencies, the bank is not a AAA. So the bank has been making efforts. And I want to answer your question. Maybe I just want to preempt.
By all means, go ahead, please.
So a few years back, we were not active in the Eurobond market. Today, we are meeting with partners. The bank is having bilateral relationship with other countries and other institutions to see how it can raise funds. Now, it would be very difficult with a current rating. Most of the time, and Anita, I want to say this, African countries are punished because of the environment they live in. If you look at the methodology used by some of the rating agencies or all of the rating agencies, they take into consideration the environment, the security environment, and what have you. And these are things that cannot, these are exogenous factors. So it is very much important for consideration to be given at the level of the multilateral institutions, especially the World Bank and the IMF, to see that these countries need to intervene in these things to raise funds. Because now, most of the countries today in West Africa are not able to go on the Eurobond market or any other foreign market to raise funds because of their low rating, which is almost junk. Senegal recently just junk, Ghana and other places. If they went there, they will be charged enormous sum of money, interest rate, which also impacts on, debt repayment. Debt repayment takes away from schools, it takes away from hospitals, and the rest of it. So at the end of the day, we'll just be in a vicious cycle that can never end. What is our development model? So it is about time that our partners started having a rethink with us to look at the bread and butter issue. China, for example, did not develop because they had an IMF program. No, China and all the countries, the Asian tigers. We need to adapt those things. Some of us are passionate about that. As somebody who studied development economics, I know that if Africa continues in this direction for a long time, we may not have the necessary development. We need to change the structures of our economies. And by that, take for example, if Ghana today decided to transform its cocoa sector, where we can manufacture chocolate, we can bring in all of these things. Imagine the addition to GDP. Imagine the number of jobs that will be created. If Ghana does that, there will be unemployment in Western countries. So there's about time that we started to think and say, I think aloud. And we're not saying that we'll stop abruptly, but it should be graduated in such a way that we change the development paradigm. And maybe I don't want to go too far into it because then it gets but I think we are here for the president's forum. The president's roundtable.
Well,
and then I think this is something that we need to have this high conversation with our partners. I used to be at the World Bank anyway, so rather for your information, I was at the. So this is a question that when we went on missions to other countries, people brought up these questions, and I know on the other side, because I was at the side, and what have you. So it is very delicate. It's not an easy thing for us to say we can just go to the market because you have to have ratings. There is no country in our region that is a AAA. There's no country that even has any. So how do they even go to raise funds at competitive level? So it also impacts the public finances. There's no fiscal space. So there has to be the fiscal space.
Yeah. And I see where the heart and the mind are going. And you know what? Sometimes when you're passionate about a certain issue, and maybe when you feel the urgency around it, you can't really separate the feeling of discussing it from it being whether or not it's the right platform. So I'm with you 100%. A message of congratulations coming to you, Rajesh. Hello, Anita. Mr. Rajesh. Mr. Rajesh mentioned that he wants to empower the youth, and that is how come they are working with locals to ensure that the knowledge is passed on. This is exactly what I would like to see in partnerships between locals and internationals. So please congratulate him for us. So congratulations to you. And having said that, also to you, Magnus. Yes, Anita, it is so true. I'm an engineer. And can you even believe that right now in Ghana, when you talk about pursuing engineering, people say you want to become a fitter, but it's bigger than that. Well, it is. So the perception, as you were mentioning, not only, there's the fact that we need more engineers, the perception around what engineering is also has to change. Is there anything specific, I'm putting you on the spot on this, is there anything specific that you would say to encouraging more young people to become engineers, perhaps?
Well, it's evident today around the world. It's like we say, Africa rise and it's Africa's turn. If you look at the continent where the action should be and will be in the next few decades, it's Africa. We have a huge infrastructure deficits, and I still hold my view that we need a lot more engineers, looking at the ratios that I mentioned earlier on. And also probably to fill in that question, which was put earlier on about the fact of having a resilient infrastructure. Well, we cannot build resilient infrastructure if we do not have the professionals. And so engineering still remains key to any economy. Either you have the professionals or either you buy it. And so we need to train more engineers as a sub-region, of course, and as a continent. Like I did mention, one engineer to 40,000 citizens is not acceptable. US is doing, like I said, 1 to 200. Okay, and so we have to be very, very intentional and decisive at addressing capacity gaps and issues, because we cannot, no matter the amount of money we bring to the continent or we bring to the sub-region, like he did mention, the funds are there. We have the enthusiasm to borrow. Our government showed that. But what we lack is technical knowledge. What we lack is technical knowledge. And if you take, for example, Korea, a country of nearly 90 million people, they have about 400 universities. 360 of them is private, 40 of them is public, compared to what is happening in Africa. So we need to look at these ratios seriously. Otherwise, no matter the amount we bring in, if we don't have the capacity to actually do justice to what we are doing, it doesn't happen. And I think we also need to rethink the whole issue of trade within the continent and ask ourselves, what exactly do we want? Okay, because if you take, for example, what's happening just on potato trade in Europe. So the research is, for example, done in Germany, and they grow potatoes in Austria. Now, when they harvest potatoes, they take it to Italy to wash it. Then they bring it back to the Netherlands to package. And these are transported on Scania and Volvo trucks. And so we see the value addition on potatoes. Now, as a sub-region and as a continent, we need to begin to ask ourselves what we want. We import so much tomatoes, we are almost importing maize. And we need to be very strategic in looking at how we can develop intra-trade. Okay, if you look at the trade between us as a sub-region and other countries, okay, we even we exported less than we imported. We are doing around 150 billion of exports, and we are importing almost 190 billion, right? But we are not trading amongst ourselves. So you can imagine 350 million ECOWAS citizens eating chocolate produced in Ghana. You go to Nigeria today, you will not find one Ghanaian branded chocolate in Nigeria, but they eat chocolate. So what's happening? And so we need to look at our policies as a sub-region. And as a people, we need to sit and rethink what we want to do ourselves. The development banks like the World Bank and so on have a limitation. That is a matter of the heart. How do we want to move on, going from here as a sub-region? That decision will not be taken by other external people. We have to ask ourselves, as citizens of West Africa, ECOWAS, as citizens of Africa, where do we want to go? And I think this will inform how we build our infrastructure, how we trade, okay? And like I said, some of the things, like you said earlier on, to travel to Mali, you have to travel outside this continent before you arrive to come back, okay? And I think what EBID did at the time is a very good example, and we need to look at these examples and see how we bring these ideas to other sectors. And I think that food security is so yes, that we need to address this issue by looking at how we are able to feed ourselves first and foremost. I think when there's food on the table, other things will align.
Unfortunately, I can only offer you water this morning. But Rajesh, we've come to the last round of questions, and I'm really keen on passing on this information on how people can take advantage of certain financing models that may be available. So I want to use your examples, or start off with you, look at some of the examples. I'm looking at the public-private partnerships. Of course, we've talked about how crucial they are for bridging infrastructure financing gaps, but I would like you to share some successful PPPs that you can see and you can use as the blueprint, for building sustainable economies per what you have seen in the ECOWAS region.
When I was hearing Mr. Sir and also Magnus, first thing which comes to our mind is, before all this thing, as he rightly said, the ratings of the countries are not good where we are doing projects. We don't have a good engineering strength to execute high complex projects. But before that, we need to have something in place, that is something called structuring of projects. Structuring in the sense that we need to have a good kind of an agreement in place with the recipient country wherever we are doing projects in terms of PPP. I'll give an example where we have worked in Guinea Conakry. We did one of the second largest bauxite mining infrastructure, putting up the bauxite mining infrastructure from pit to port, putting up the mining infrastructure and making sure it is taken to the port with a rail infrastructure in place. So this project is actually owned by government of Dubai. The company is called Emirates Global Aluminium. It's a subsidiary of Guinea Alumina Corporation, and we were the contractors engaged for this prestigious project. So the entire framework was designed in such a way that even if there is some kind of a political instability in the country, the project would run on its own, considering they had made a lot of arrangement in the sense of political risk insurance was there in place. The funding was from the Dubai government. So all this coming together, even there was an instability in Guinea in 2021, but we finished the project before that. But still, after the instability, the project has continued. It has not stopped, and that is where the PPP will have a success, where these kind of projects will continue to grow irrespective of the instability in the governments or instability in the political environment. So that, I think, we need to look into consideration before we structure any PPPs, because the framework has to be in place before we engage on these kind of talks further. We need to ensure that there are no revenue leakages for PPP to function on its own, because that is where the developer will get the money from, the money which he can put in as an equity. Because we work with a lot of institutions like IFC, we work with World Bank, we work with African Development Bank, we work with Afri-Exim Bank. So all of these banks, they are in the business of lending money. But at the same time, how do we ensure that the money is not getting lost anywhere? Because we, as coming as a contractor, we also have that responsibility to protect their interest, the bank's interest. We don't want something to go untoward in near future, in 5 years down the line. We don't want something bad to happen where the repayment will start getting affected. So that is something which we always look into consideration before we start any project. We need to plan accordingly, that what are the kind of insurances, guarantees from MIGA, how MIGA can support us in such projects, how EBID is already working with us in more than 5 to 6 projects in last 10 years. So we are just trying to find ways and means to coming together as a pool with various funding agencies in place and see how best we can function.
Thank you so much, Rajesh. Magnus, what financing models or partnership strategies have been particularly effective for you? I mean, we're almost coming to the close of this. So in hindsight or on hindsight, what has worked the best? And if you were given an opportunity to share that experience as per what you would suggest to people paying attention, what would it be?
Well, I will talk generally about the blend, because sometimes you have development banks that usually procure or assist our government to procure projects. Okay, so that's available. That has been very successful. Then in recent times, the EBF, okay, design of FDB, finance, design, and build has been another which has also gone well for some of the projects we are undertaking. So I will say that it's a blend, okay, but there is opportunity to do more, like I said. barring the issues of rating and so on, the blended financing is good, where you have a loan, you have a grant, you have development banks together participating. And like Rob mentioned, what they're doing with the Kumasi project, for example, is to do like a collaborative financing. So I'm aware that the bank is talking to other development partners in order to mobilize the 450 million needed for the project. So these are very effective ways, and I'm aware also, I'm not participating in this, but what has happened recently in Tanzania, there's a bit of blend and also collaborative financing for their.
Robert, you mentioned a few examples earlier on, but can I ask you to perhaps highlight some of the financing models that the World Bank really does feel, this works specifically for ECOWAS?
Sure. Well, I think, as we've been discussing, PPPs and then guarantees, those would be the two instruments I think we want to focus on. And, we don't have to reinvent the wheel, right? We know these have worked well. Colleagues have mentioned East Asian examples. They've been extremely successful in many other parts of the world, and there's no reason why they can't be successful here. On the PPP side, however, there needs to be a sound legal underpinning for those, and a national PPP law. There also needs to be then a robust regulatory framework, and some of our countries are still lacking those. So it's about some of the foundations, for example, that we need to strengthen in Liberia and Sierra Leone, to take two of the examples that I cover. And then the institutional capacity to work with investors to design and structure the deals and the projects. And that requires some technical assistance still in many cases. We provide some of that, but others provide it as well. So I think those are, on the guarantee side, colleagues have already mentioned access to World Bank guarantees. As I said, we're very excited about this new guarantee platform. Please look it up on our website. And take advantage of it. We're eager to really grow that business by multiples, and so we're looking for opportunities. So very happy to talk with colleagues from the private sector and EBID afterwards to see where we might do that. I'll just mention one last point that I'd like to stress a little bit more, which is on contingent financing instruments. So we know the countries in this region are affected by natural disasters. We also know that these disasters are getting worse because of climate change. So it's not a question of whether, it's a question of when the next disaster will hit. We've had droughts in the north of Ghana. We've had flooding elsewhere, sea level rise. I mean, there are many challenges that we're facing. A lot of the countries we work in don't have national contingent financing instruments. So we're working with them to put those in place. So to give you a specific example, in Liberia, we're supporting an instrument we have in the World Bank Group called a Catastrophe Deferred Drawdown Option, CAT-DDO. So very simply put, the government will set aside as a small amount of its IDA allocation, and then when the disaster strikes, they'll be able to leverage that 3 times that amount. So in Liberia, the government is going to set aside $5 million in IDA, and when the disaster strikes, they'll be able to bring in $20 million immediately to support whatever kind of urgent need they have, reconstruction or rehabilitation. Now, in order to do that, they have to have a national disaster policy in place and a national disaster management plan in place. So we're working with them to develop that.
Exceptional. McDonald, I bring you the last question before I will come back to this table with what I like to call the fire round, and you all have only one question to answer. Because I like you all, I'll give you the question right now, so you can give it some thought. And it's about what you believe one key action ECOWAS should take immediately to build on the successes and drive sustainable infrastructure growth across the region, what you believe it is. So I give you some time to think about it. While I come to you, McDonald, yep. I would like to finish with a glass half full. Okay? We started there, we never went down, technically. Okay. I want to talk about EBID successes. We're talking about pulling in the pools, etc. And how has EBID succeeded in attracting private capital? It's when you look at the concept of what the bank is trying to do, yourself, your colleagues, and the president, etc., what does this success story truly look like?
Oh, thank you so much, Anita, and I am very happy you asked this question. Uh, when I joined the bank in 2011, I mean 2013, we had difficulty raising funds, very much, so. And let me say that as a development bank, EBID is not a deposit-taking bank. So we have to go to partners like Rabel and other people to raise funds. And we did not have good ratings at the time. But it takes the ingenuity of one man. And I don't want to sing the praises of Mr. President, in whose honor we're having this roundtable. But he has brought to bear a sort of a dynamism that had never been seen before in the bank. And I'm not saying this because, maybe I'm on TV, I want to say. In private, in public, I say this. Uh, in recent years, we have been very successful on the UMR market. We have raised a lot of funds on the UMR market. We have been able to raise funds from partners in Europe and America and other places. So much so that the European Investment Bank, we have worked. One of the things that we have done, Anita, is that we have worked tirelessly to improve our little rating. We do not have an investment grade rating, but we have been able to put into place all sorts of key, even though we are not rated by any central bank, we are conscious of the fact that we need to improve all of our things. We have reduced non-performing loans. We have employed top-notch professionals. We have strengthened our risks framework. So we are able now, the bank is able to attract, capital or funding from partners who would necessarily not give it to us. The bank, however, has, worked towards improving some of these, difficulties that it encountered before in the face of difficult capital payment from member states. And let me take this opportunity to thank the people of Ghana and Nigeria for the support that they have given the bank. Ghana today is Ghana is the only country that has a pay of the second tranche of its capital. So once these things are paid, so it took the ingenuity of one man, the president and his team, to really work towards attracting capital. So much so that EBID today has a lot of money, and we are looking for projects to finance. So in spite of our ratings, which is not as good, have been able, in the face, our three countries are threatening to leave us and to leave the bank as well. So the bank has these things. So coming to your question, it takes sometimes leadership, which I think a lot of institutions have missing. It takes also dedicated staff members, people who are working to improve the lot of their community. So that's what EBID has done. Success story. Today, EBID has been able to raise in record time funds from the UMR capital market. We closed a deal in 48 hours, which never happened before. In 48 hours, the bank was able to close a deal of over 240 billion CFA franc. So this is something that EBID was able to do. In terms of raising money on the in the European bilateral partnership, we recently got $100 million, 100 million euro from EIB to support ESG projects in the sub-region. The bank is also working on plans to attract what you refer to as hybrid capital. And one of the people that EBID has approached is the World Bank. We want the World Bank and others to come on in our capital to serve as, equity participants. These are things that the bank is working on to ensure that in the absence of maybe very good rating, in the absence of all of those, the bank is working as seriously hard to improve its lot. So to tell you, it takes commitment, it takes leadership, which is not in short supply at EBID. And we were also recently in Washington. We met with the Central African Development Bank. They came to us to ask us how we have managed, and we gave them our success story. In fact, I recommended one of my colleagues who works with me. He's in his room now. Dr. Joseph Asanso, to go there and give them a lecture on the road to investment grade. We're working on that. So we are working on all of these things. The bank is working on all of those things and what have you. So I'm very happy you asked the question. And in fact, the partners that EBID met in Washington, D.C., they were very much impressed, including Moody's. They are one of our one of the rating agencies of the bank. And they were impressed with the kind of work EBID has done to reduce non-performing loans. It's not easy to reduce non-performing loans. The bank is in a sub-region where a lot of people take money and they don't want to pay. The bank used to have non-performing loans at around almost 10%. Today, the bank has non-performing loan of around 4%, which is manageable. And he has taken the ingenuity of Mr. President to do that. So we are very much happy with what is happening, and the bank hopes to continue this. So I hope that I answered it.
Well, that's a beautiful eulogy, and I have to say a big thank you to you, Dr. George Ejikun Donko, sorry. And it's funny because I said to him, I'm seeing you on November 5th, and we're very excited. Unfortunately, he was unable to join us today, but his spirit is somewhere here, so you know that it's very palpable. Thank you so much, Doc, Your Excellency. You are an amazing leader indeed. So brings us to the end of this, but not without asking each one of you this fire question. Rajesh, I start off with you. What is one key action that ECOWAS should take immediately to build on these successes that we've shared and more, and drive sustainable infrastructure growth across the region? What would you say it is?
I think they are ticking all the boxes as of now, but there is always a scope to grow and improve ourselves. But one thing which I would like to highlight here is to establish a project prioritization and monitoring unit, which will cater to all the regional countries, which could drive the infrastructure projects, the priority infrastructure projects in these countries. And also, if they can also give a seed funding to develop the studies, the feasibility studies or design engineering, to do all those kind of things, which will actually gain a lot of prominence in terms of when you take that project to the world market, it will actually look very, attractive to the funding agencies as well. So this is something I think which we can do. And also second point, what we can add is to reinforce the supply chains in the West African market. See, we always talk about, funding coming from Europe, funding coming from US, funding coming from India, funding coming from China. All these agencies, they have the content requirement. Like if you are talking about Chinese, they say 70% content has to come from China. India say the 70% content has to come from India. UK, they say 40% content has to come from UK. Why can't the West Africa EBID Bank reinforce these requirements in countries where they are functioning? They can say 40% content has to come from West Africa manufacturing people. That will actually drive growth when it comes to, real growth, when it comes to integration, regional integration. That is something which I would like to see. And that is something which can happen. I am sure it can certainly happen.
Beautiful. Magnus.
Yes, so I will continue from where we were just ended by saying that we need to harmonize our education, particularly the engineering education, within the sub-region of the continent. We need to harmonize our engineering standards. As I speak to you now, we don't even have a harmonized road design standard. But I'm happy to inform you that the ECOWAS has recently procured a consultant working on something like that. So these are key, because I keep talking about capacity building, and these are key to drive this and continue the successes. And then thirdly and finally, I would like to say that we need to be more strategic in developing what we call intra-trade. What is it we need? What can we do for ourselves? And how can we generate employment for our teeming youth?
Wonderful. Robert.
ECOWAS is an extremely important institution in these countries, and we very much support ECOWAS and EBID and look forward to working more together. I would give the same advice that I give ourselves in the World Bank Group, which is support countries to get the policies right. Get the policies right. And two policies in particular, generally speaking. attract the policies to attract FDI, the investment climate, get that right. The business climate, get that right to attract domestic investment as well. And secondly, get the policies right to strengthen the efficiency and effectiveness of public spending. A lot of public spending could be more efficient, and we can support governments together to help them to improve efficiency and effectiveness of their scarce capital as well.
Thank you so much, Robert. McDonald, you have the last word.
Thank you. The last one. Let me thank this distinguished panel for adequately answering all of the questions to my satisfaction and satisfaction of the bank. And let me tell Robert that we have a lot to work on, and also say that. But what can ECOWAS do? I think we need to sustain what we have done, what ECOWAS has done. For example, I talk about the establishment of EcoBank. I talk about the establishment of ASCAI, and I talk about other things. Today, there are concepts around about the Lagos-Abidjan highway. I think these are things that the community needs to take seriously. For example, how much will be added to our GDP if this road is finally actualized. So there is a need for the community to actually take into consideration and work on realizing some of the grand projects it has undertaken. And we are also, on behalf of the people in the community, we are also asking our brothers who are threatening to leave us to come back. It's only with a big group working together we can make progress. So I think that EBID is ready to, help in whatever way it can to intervene in the infrastructure sector, working along with the World Bank and you all from the private sector to see how the bank itself can do it. And I would like to also thank the president for conceptualizing this very important concept of the President's Roundtable, which looks at various thematic themes every year. We hope that next year will be another theme that will be captivating, so that we invite all of you again to come and give your views on it. So I would like to thank you so much. I think, Madam Moderator, you did a very good work. Like I said, in April, I was very much impressed by the way you had a passion, whatever. So thank you so much.
Thank you too, McDonald. And there's something very important that you said about, bringing us together to have this thematic conversation. I just reiterating, hoping that this reaches the corners of the region or even the continent that is required. But just to let you understand the value of what we've discussed, 23-year-old KNUST student Joshua Akron sent a message to say, I didn't know that talking about infrastructure was so important. Today, you've changed my mind from it feeling like it's a them problem to it's a me challenge.
Well, that's good.
That is exceptional.
Well,
this is the Africa we want, where young people feel as if what we, older generation are discussing is about them. And like I said, building and improving infrastructure is not about only the construction. It's also about the transformation. What does this Africa we want really look like? It looks like people coming out of poverty because now they have access to trade. It looks like young people being excited about leaving university because they have access to employment. It looks like young people are being happy to go to school because they have access to education. So these conversations aren't only about the World Bank or EBID or Delin or Rajesh's company. They are about us. And it was Magnus who said something very crucial. If we don't ask ourselves what we want, there's no way we even know what we are looking for. So whether it's PPPs, whether it's from Development Bank, whether it's from EBID, we have to know what we want as Africans in order for us to understand the urgencies around our needs. So on behalf of the president of EBID, Dr. George Ajikun Donkor, on behalf of his extraordinary team from Lome to Accra and everywhere else in between, and on behalf of the team, the technical team here at Metro TV, DSTV 277, we say a big thank you. And I think a bigger thank you to these wonderful esteemed guests who have made time to join us for this crucial conversation. Mr. McDonald Seyi-Guanu, thank you so much. You are the Director of the Research and Strategic Planning Department at EBID. Mr. Magnus Lincoln Kwashi, CEO, Dellen Consult Limited. A few people are sending me a message. They want internship. Dr. Rajesh Nair, Regional Head Group Business Development, Shaporaji Palonji and Company Private Limited. Dr. Robert Talierso, Country Director, Ghana Liberia and Sierra Leone World Bank Group. I say a big, big, big thank you for your individual and your organizational contributions to the continent of Africa. My name is Anita Erskine, and I will always, always be dedicated to conversations around the development, the transformation, the growth, and ultimately the prosperity of our wonderful continent, Africa. See you next time.